Hello, we're back for Chapter 1, Section 2, Part 2, as we finish this out, we had looked at the Native Americans' settlement of North and South America, and now we're going to look at how Europeans are going to start arriving. So the Spanish century. During the 16th century, Spain is going to both be the one exploring the most and exploiting the New World. So they came to explore, find out what resources were here, looking for riches, and then sought to take out any of those resources that they could that would benefit them, increase their stake in the world and the economy. And so we see the Spanish taking the lead in the 1500s. So they start out in the Caribbean and they expand into the mainland, take down Native American groups, and start to build a large empire, not of necessarily people claiming being on the land, but large tracts of land that they had claimed. Cortez is going to be the first of these individuals to arrive. So he comes in and faces off against Montezuma, the king of the Aztecs, and seeks to take down the Aztec Empire. He is able to conquer Tenochtitlan, the current day Mexico City, and even though he's outnumbered 100 to 1, he had a lot of things going for him. He had technology, so advanced weaponry and armor that protected him against the Aztecs. He had other Native American groups that might have been seen as enemies of the Aztecs that were willing to help him fight against them. And also he has diseases in his favor. The Europeans brought a lot of disease that they were immune to, that they were just carriers for, with them, like typhus, influenza, whooping cough, malaria, measles, smallpox, and others, that they spread to these Native American people, and it caused the population of the Native Americans to drop by 90%. It just devastated their population because they had no immunity or way to fight back against these diseases. So here is Cortez and Montezuma, and a rendition of what Tenochtitlan might have looked like at the time of the arrival of the Spanish. Coronado was another explorer who came up through the southwestern U.S., visited Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, even made it into Kansas. He discovers the Grand Canyon and starts to continue to claim land for Spain. Juan Ponce de Leon arrives and comes and claims Florida for Spain, looking for the riches there. Wealth was a goal for him. The fountains of youth. Other explorers have been looking, like Coronado, looking for the cities of gold, hoping to claim those resources. And he sets up St. Augustine's. That was the first permanent settlement in North America, as a settlement for the people, setting up a fortification there for protection. And so that gives a stake for the Spanish in the region. Another explorer was De Soto. He travels through the southeastern U.S. and discovers the Mississippi River for the Spanish. Many people knew about this resource also as a good trade artery, but De Soto is the first to find it for the Spanish, and they'll use that, and we see that claimed and used it as a border in many ways for the U.S., for the French and the Spanish, and their holding of lands, using that kind of as an anchoring point. So we'll talk more about that later on. Now, this Spanish century, we never see Spain really firmly establishing itself in North America, setting up large cities, and having a lot of wide settlement. They're more about exploiting the land, getting resources out of it, whether it's gold or crops that could make them money, and they don't really develop it into large settlements. The Spanish, along with the Portuguese, will bring African slaves to the New World to start working on some of the plantation-style agriculture that they will establish in the Caribbean and in Mexico and South America. So we will talk more about the arrival of slaves in the English colony in our next chapter. But it is these two groups that bring the first, through the triangular trade, brings the slaves to the New World. Now, the European nations outside of Spain also, they wanted their own piece of the pie. We talked about mercantilism, that expanding piece of the pie. You always want a bigger chunk. So other European nations want the riches that Spain has accrued. They want to find their own. So they start seeking out opportunities to do that. And they also feared that if Spain grows too powerful, it would start turning its eyes towards other countries in Europe and trying to claim land within Europe also. This is Sir Francis Drake. He is going to be key, and nicknamed the Sea Dog for his exploits on the sea. He is going to be part of the fight with the Spanish Armada and the English fleet. So under Elizabeth I, she supports the seeking to control the Atlantic, fight off the Spanish, and have a more dominant position. They're not evenly matched. The Spanish Armada definitely has at this time the superior navy, but during this fight, the English are able to overwhelm it and get a victory. It's one of the greatest accomplishments for Queen Elizabeth I during her reign. And Drake is well praised for it too. It leads to the defeat of King Philip II, who ruled Spain. And their navy just cannot come back from this attack. They lost ships to tactics where the English burned ships and set them on fire and put them into the Spanish ships, and they couldn't move away quickly enough. Also, a huge storm came up that wrecked many of their boats. So they are overwhelmed, and so it allows the English to start having a stake and being in a better position to control the Atlantic and in a way control the colonization within North America. So the English make their first attempts at colonization through Sir Walter Raleigh. He convinces Queen Elizabeth I to let him set up a colony in Virginia, and they're going to do so on Roanoke Island, which is on the outer banks off the coast of North Carolina. So the first attempt comes in 1586 when Sir Richard Grenville gets the funding and goes to set it up at Roanoke. They come at the wrong time, are unsuccessful, and so they have to turn back. A year later, John White will take families for the first time to Roanoke to try to establish a settlement there. John White brings his daughter, who is pregnant, and her daughter, Virginia Dare. It becomes the first English child to be born in the New World. John White has to return to get supplies for the settlement, but he is derailed for a couple years and does not get back until 1590. In 1590, they return to Roanoke settlement and no one's there. All they can find is the word Croatan, which was a local Native American tribe. And so Roanoke Island becomes known as the Lost Colony. They're not sure what happened to the people, if they all died of starvation or other causes, or if they were killed or captured by the Indians. There's not a clear message. It's just that it disappeared and no one knows what completely happened to it. So this first attempt was unsuccessful. They'll take a few more years to again come at Jamestown. Now, other nations, starting with France, will take an effort to settle this region. So they're coming through Canada. They're very dependent on the mother country. They're still listening to the king, controlling the policies, sending resources back to France. They're not really trying to set up their own homeland here and recreate what they had back in France. They have plans in many ways of going back. They do set up trade relationships with the Native American groups for trading furs and marry Indian maidens to solidify trade relationships. But they're really not here for necessarily setting up an empire. Here's a comparison of where the English colonies will start out and where New France was located, mostly in Canada, along these river systems in the Great Lakes also. In New Netherlands, it's located in the New York area. Henry Hudson claims it and starts to establish it in 1624 and sets up the city of New Amsterdam. New Netherlands is later seized by England in 1664 and renamed after the Duke of York to be New York. So we do still see Dutch influences throughout the region because of its settlement prior to by the Dutch. New Sweden was founded in 1638, so we see that along the Delaware River, parts of 3 current states, Delaware, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. It had been weakened and been taken over by the Dutch in 1655, and then in that way was absorbed again into England because of that. So New Sweden gets absorbed into New Netherlands. The New Netherlands is absorbed into the colony that will become New York. So New Sweden does also bring with it some influence, and it brings the style of housing of the log cabin, which was adopted and used by many settlers as they moved west. Now we know that there is a difference between the way that the English settle and the French and Spanish. So you're going to be asked to compare those two. We see the English will come in greater numbers than as families. When we look at the French and Spanish, they came as single men, smaller groups, but the English come, where we have 102 coming over on the Mayflower. The next major expedition to that region brings 1,000. So the numbers are larger. They're coming as families. They're wanting to set down roots. They're not planning to just try to make their a fortune and go back home. They're here for good. They are bringing their heritage, their political institutions to set up here. So they set up churches, they set up schools, businesses and homes, and trying to create new communities here, and for a more permanent basis in the New World as they start creating colonies. So we know the French and the Spanish are much more about taking things from the land and then going home, not about permanent settlements. So that does show a marked difference between these groups. So as we in this section, I encourage you to continue using your notes to fill out your study guide. If you do watch this, I'm going to be posting a lot of things tonight. I will try to get us all caught up. So I'll try to give more explanation of everything as we go through. So please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.